Hello everybody, Mrs. Horn here. I have some information that's going to get us through the first part of chapter 39. Today we're talking about how plants respond to changes in the environment and then how they send messages within the plants using hormones. We're going to start off talking about signal transduction. I have two pictures here. Both are of a potato. The first potato is very pale. The leaves haven't opened up. These are adaptations of a plant that will grow underground. The plant on the left has not been exposed to light. The plant on the right is still a potato plant, but we see nice green leaves, very sturdy stems that are growing up to the sky, longer roots, and this is after just a week of being exposed to sunlight. So how come the change? Well, the transformation began when light was received by a specific pigment in the plant, and then the changes in the shape, or the morphology, and the biochemistry, those are called greening. So the plant that was on the right looked very different, and we call those reactions greening. In order to send messages in plants, there's a three-step process, and this is the same process that we've talked about earlier in the year when we talked about cell communication and how cells communicate with each other. The same thing happens in plants. So our three steps are reception, signal transduction, and response. In reception, the signal is detected by receptors in the plant. That signal can be an environmental cue like light, or it could be something internal like a hormone. The receptor for greening is a receptor called phytochrome. Many receptors are found in the cell membrane. Phytochrome is actually in the cytoplasm, and its function is in is in light detection in the greening process. For signal transduction, this involves second messengers, and second messengers are chemicals that are produced in the cytoplasm. They help to amplify the signal from the receptor to proteins that will cause a response. And then transduction helps to regulate cellular activity. For the response step, this leads to an increased activity of enzymes by stimulating the transcription of the messenger RNA for the enzymes. Or the other option is it might activate existing enzymes by adding a phosphate group, and we know that this is called phosphorylation. Plants have responses to different hormones and different environmental stimuli. A tropism is the growth of a plant to something or away from a stimulus. Phototropism is an example of one, and this is where the growth of the stem or the shoot will grow toward the light. You may have seen, if you have houseplants at home, as they grow, they actually bend a little bit toward the window. The curving of the plant results from the differential growth of the cells. So the cells on the light side of the plant, so the side that's closest to the window, they grow, but the cells on the opposite side, so we would call that the shade side, they're going to elongate faster, which is causing the curving of the plant. And this is what I was just saying, the dark side actually elongates faster. There have been many experiments done with phototropism Charles Darwin, who we have talked in depth about, and his son in the late 1800s, they used grass seedlings. Each plant has a sheath covering called a coleoptile that surrounds it. Their conclusion was that the shoot of the plant is going to bend toward the light, but only if the tip of the plant, of the grass, was there, or if it was uncovered. So here's an example, or here's what their experiment looked like. All of these are grass seedlings, so a little blade of grass. This is the normal, so as light is headed in this direction, the cells on the dark side, and here's a zoomed in version of it, the cells on the dark side elongate faster, which is causing the curving motion. And then they tried a couple of different things, and this is what Darwin and his son did in the late 1800s. They did these 4 things. They cut off the tip and observed that it didn't bend. They covered the tip with an opaque cap. An opaque cap is one that light could not travel through, and it didn't bend. Then they tried to cover it with a transparent cap, one that light could go through, and they showed that it did bend. And then they put a cap that was opaque down on the base of the seedling, and it still bent. Now, Boysen and Jensen, they took Darwin's experiment and added to it in the early 1900s, and they took a block of gelatin and they cut the tip and put the block of gelatin on there and then put the tip back on. Now the gelatin is a very porous material, and nutrients or hormones can pass through it. And they noticed that this plant seedling did bend toward the light. They tried something similar, but the second time they did it, they added a piece of mica, which is not a very porous material, and the seedling did not bend. Their conclusion with all this was that the signal allowing the shoot to grow toward the light was a chemical that was movable. So it was coming from the tip of the root, and it moved down the seedling. F.W. Wendt then modified the Boysen and Jensen experiment in 1926, so this is a third person to add on. He removed the tip and put it on an agar substance. Now, an agar is also a material that's very porous and very nutrient rich. The chemical in the tip diffused out of the agar, and then they took the agar that had the nutrients in it, or the chemical, excuse me, and then put it on another plant to see what would happen. He concluded that the agar did in fact contain the chemical from the tip, and when I say chemical, I'm talking about a hormone. He concluded that the chemical is what stimulated the growth, and the chemical is called an auxin. This is a hormone. So here's a picture of his experiment. So he took a grass seedling, he cut the tip off, and he put the tip on the agar block. After some time went by, the chemical, or the auxin, diffused into the agar block, with the tip no longer having any auxin in it. He just took the block and simply put it on the grass seedling, and we can see in pink here that was the growth that resulted. When he put the block on only half of the plant grew, and which caused the curvature of the seedling. This one here is just the block, no auxin in it, and then our control showed that with no tip it doesn't grow. Plants respond to light because it's required for photosynthesis. Light will cue certain key events in the growth and the development of a plant. Photomorphogenesis, that's a mouthful. This is the effect of light on the shape of the plant. And light reception allows plants to measure days and seasons. Blue light. So if you think of the spectrum of light. You've learned Roy G. Biv is the rainbow pattern of light. Blue light is actually most effective in phototropism. The pigment is called phototropin. Inhibiting the hypocaudal elongation, so stopping those cells to elongate. The pigment is a different one. It's cryptochrome. And then opening the stomates, which stomates are a structure that we've just talked about, that are surrounded by guard cells. The pigment is zeaxanthin. Circadian rhythm is an important concept that we have to know for plants, and this is one that will show up on the unit test. This is when physiological processes in plants continue to occur when the external factors are controlled. This is a rhythm in the plant that tells them when the length of the day or the growing seasons. It's not placed by a known environmental variable. So I'm going to show you a picture of some bean plants, and hopefully this will shed some light on what this means. A bean plant will, at noon, will open up its leaves very flat, very wide, so that it receives a maximum amount of light. And midday, typically at around noon, there's a lot of sunlight in the sky, so this plant holds its leaves up very high to receive the maximum amount of sunlight. Whereas at midnight, it's not collecting any light. So rather than waste a lot of energy standing up straight and tall, these leaves kind of fold on themselves because it's not going to waste a lot of its energy standing up straight when it's not needed. If that plant is left in the darkness, that bean plant is still going to rise and lower its leaves, but not at the exact time of day under natural conditions. This is similar to a jet lag response. So that bean plant and the whole idea of circadian rhythm is that it will still open its leaves, stand up tall, and then at a different time of the day, it will wilt a little bit and fold its leaves to conserve a little energy. And it's going to do that no matter if it's in the dark all the time, if it's in the light all the time. That is the rhythm of that plant. There is an internal message being sent for that plant to do it, to do those responses. We have plants that can be grouped into a short day plant, a long day plant. If it's a short day plant, it means that it requires very few hours of light in order to flower. A poinsettia is a really good example because poinsettias flower usually late summer, fall, or winter, and that's when the daylight hours here are a lot shorter than they are in the summer. Some plants are considered long day plants. These plants need more than a certain number of hours of sunlight. So for example, a spinach plant, which is something that will bloom in the early spring or the early summer, they need a significant greater number of hours to be productive. And then we have a day neutral plant, and this is when a flower will mature. This flowers when it's mature and it's not dependent on light. Tomatoes is a good example. When you plant tomato seeds, the packet of seeds will usually say how many days from germination to when it is a ripe or a mature plant. It's not actually day length that is the important part of the short day and the long day plant. It's actually the number of hours that it spends in the darkness. So a short day plant is actually a long night plant. Plants require a certain number of continuous hours in the darkness in order to produce flowers. So it doesn't really have anything to do with how many hours of daylight they have, but more so the hours of no light they have. A chrysanthemum is considered a short day plant, which again means a long night plant. They usually flower in the fall. Our flower industry has figured out a way to prolong its blooming by interrupting each night with a flash of light. By doing this, one long night actually equals 2 short nights, which holds the flowering off until Mother's Day in May, and that's why we see all these chrysanthemums come out in the spring and in early May. But naturally, chrysanthemums don't flower then. It would be more of a plant that would flower in the fall. There are other stimuli that plants respond to. Gravity is one of them. The roots of a plant have a positive response to gravity, which helps them grow toward gravity. Shoots have a negative response, so they grow away from it, so they grow up towards the light. And then auxins also, again, play a role in this type of response. Thigmomorphogenesis. This is where changes in the form of a plant as a result of mechanical stress. The mechanical stimulation activates the signal transduction. It increases calcium in the plant. It activates genes, which affects the cell wall properties. A good example of this is if you live where I live and there's a lot of open space. The wind that goes through our property isn't blocked by much. And the trees that we plant there have a stockier and a heftier trunk on the wind side of the plant because they need it stronger on that side so that they can continue to stand up straight. So this is an example of the plant has been under stress and this is its response. It's grown stronger on the one side of the tree. And the last thing is thigmotropism. This is a growth in response to touch, and vines are a really good example of this. Vines are a great plant that responds to touch. When they grow, as soon as they hit something, so they touch a fence or they touch a house, they start to grow around whatever structure they grow around, and that helps them grow up. So a vine's constant struggle is to get higher and higher to get more light, and that is the response that's what hormones inside of a vine help them do. They want to ultimately reach the canopy of the forest, but if they're attaching to your house, not really a forest, they're still going to try to do the same thing. So that gets us through the first half of chapter 39, and I hope this helps.